Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Panther Airsoft Folding Table Talk. This is episode 72. 72. So in today's segment, we're going to be going over, do you need a Mosfet? That is a big question for a lot of airsofters nowadays is, do you need a Mosfet? Um, Before we go through that, we're going to go through some introductions here. We got Tack over here is going to be our tech and as well as the host for this topic. He I basically posed a question to him saying, "Hey, do you really need a MOSFET?" And then he got into a huge rant on yes or no, and a whole bunch of things that I didn't really know about. I'm basically the non-tech here at this point. All of these guys are, and yeah, and I decided, okay, why don't we just make a topic out of that because you're talking so much that we should just film you talking about it. And he's like, "No, can we not?" And I'm like, "Too late. I'm already making a segment."
I did this to myself.
Yes, you did this to yourself. So, no introductions needed there. He's one of our hosts. We got David down here. He is an airsoft tech as well, very well known in the community. Goes by SchoolBoy Airsoft. Welcome back, SchoolBoy. Hope
It's
the
good to be back.
holidays are treating you well. Hanukkah was great, I hope. Christmas
They've
is
both
great.
been lovely.
Yeah. And yeah, welcome and thank you for joining on this segment. I'm sure that this topic is something that interests you the most because you have to deal with this all the time with clients or your builds and such. And it's just one of those questions: do you need a MOSFET or do you just go old fashioned way and just use gears and stuff? Oh yeah, tactical. Or sorry, Schoolboy Tactical is your rebrand. Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's all good.
Yeah,
I changed it very recently.
yeah, you
So
did. So Schoolboy Tactical is what you go by now. So welcome back. Yeah, we're gonna be going through this topic pretty soon here, and we got Raven down below me. How you doing,
Oh,
Raven?
hello, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on again.
Perfect. And yeah, Raven is part of Overwatch 6. I'm guessing you are the tech for those guys as well.
Yep,
I'm guessing you get posed the same questions. Do I need a MOSFET or not? I'm sure you have your own
yep,
opinions on that. And
of course.
yeah, all of these guys are more skilled than me, so I'm gonna let them take over in terms of what they're talking about because I am the dumb one here when it comes to like teching. Like for regular folks out there, if you don't want to get your hands dirty, you send it to a tech. These techs are very good at what they do. Make sure you pay them good at what they do because time is money, guys. I just want to put that down for you guys because yeah, it's hard to fight someone, that's a good friend and they don't pay you for the work that you do. But if you're doing it for love and passion, yeah, that's really up to you. But anyways, let's get started out in this topic here. Um should I start off with just the history of it or do you want to go over some things,
Well, I,
Tack?
I was I was just gonna say let's just jump into a little brief history on what a MOSFET is. Poy's got a little presentation set up for you guys. I know a lot of you guys might not care, but sometimes it's important to sort of go through a basic understanding of what something is, as well as realize, just like how a lot of things in life are watered down, right? We use MOSFET like like that when there's a lot more to it than that, you know what I mean? So yeah, if Poi can kind of just go through his little presentation, and then we'll jump into the discussion and sort of topics for our talk today.
Okay.
So Poi, yeah, go right ahead with that.
All right. So let me share my screen here. I'm going to share it with you guys too. And through here. And here we go. We're going to go into the topic of MOSFETs. All right. Are you guys able to see that?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
All right. Perfect. All right. So just double check if it's still recording just in case. Sometimes I hit random buttons and that happens. All right. There we go. David, you were saying something along the lines of like MOSFET would auto spell into something else or autocorrect.
yeah, you type it in on a phone or something like that, and it usually auto corrects. I
Moist.
think
Moist
Mosfet.
Yes,
Fed.
Mosfet.
So let's just start off with the basic MOSFET. This is the topic we're talking about. So what does MOSFET stand for? Not a lot of people actually know what MOSFET stands for. Does any of my techs know what is other than TAC?
Hold on, okay,
I
it's
said
it's a
other
it's
than
a
TAC.
oh.
I'll be honest with you, I do not remember. It's been
Okay,
a long time.
Raven.
Neither have I. It
All
has
right.
been a while. I just tell people, yeah, get a Mosfet. It's really good.
All right.
I think it has something to do with a semiconductor.
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
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 You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah. Well, it's in there.
So, MOSFET stands for metal oxide semiconductor, and the Phet stands for field effect transistor. So we are dealing with the transistor, and yeah, we're dealing with the materials of metal oxide semiconductor. All right. So it's a type of insulated gate field effect transistor that is fabricated by controlled oxidization of semiconductors, typically a silicone. So what they're doing is basically they're printing um if if I get this correct, hopefully I don't get ripped apart. They're basically printing materials out of semiconductors to then have a metal oxide semiconductor for a field effect transistor. That's the gist of it that I know of, anyway. So yeah, it's a type of insulated gate field effect transistor that is fabricated by controlled oxidization of semiconductors, typically silicone. So yeah, they're just basically building this, layer per layer, using oxidization. So they're using like light, and I think to the more advanced fabrication, they're using not UV, ultraviolet light. Yeah, UV light to get it even smaller at the 5 nanometer level. So it gets pretty tiny. All right. So the voltage of a covered gate determines the electrical conductivity of the device. This ability to change conductivity with the amount of applied voltage can be used to amplify or switching electrical signals. So switching or amplifying is what we're dealing with when it comes to transistors at this point. All right. So before we understand what MOSFET is, we're going to go through what a transistor is. So what is a transistor? A transistor is a semiconductor device used to amplify or switch electrical signals and power. So, but at this point, you guys already know what a MOSFET does to a airsoft gun, right? It basically
Zip.
Yep, it regulates your power. It
Power.
makes sure that it's a constant power, and it's not like, you flick a switch, your trigger, and then it has to travel to the motor, from the battery to the motor, right? And it's always a constant, like, high voltage from your trigger all the way up to your motor, and you get like arcs, electrical arcs that basically not damage, but is basically wears out the trigger. That's what I heard from you guys talking about it from back then. So now I understand a little bit of it here. Transistor is one of the basic building blocks of a modern electronic system. So not a lot of people know that if you hold up your phone and stuff, like, or your computer, like, there's MOSFETs filled with that thing. There's semiconductors, like, in there. And I pulled up a little statistics on how much is actually in there. And if you pull it up here, like, something like an Apple M1 Max chip has 57 billion transistors on it. 57 billion. And a couple of years ago, I heard that if you try and fit as many transistors into a atom, it would be 32 transistors that you could fit on a single atom or something like that. That's some fun fact for you. That is a lot. That is a lot. Like 57 billion into a small chip. That is a lot. And yeah, making that is actually very hard. And this is why we're in a chip shortage. So yeah, our expectations for electronics is big. So, just gonna double check here if my audio is still going. Okay, perfect. So let's move on here. So there's differences between a BJT and a Phet or FET. The voltages of covered gates determine the electrical conductivity of the device and ability, and the amount of I just read it. There's many different types of transistors, but they all have three connections called emitter, base, collector. So for the bipolar junction transistor, so the BJT is a common transistor. There's a emitter, there's a base, and then there's a collector. Now, if we move up to Phet, or what we call field effect transistor, there is a drain, which I don't think you guys use in Airsoft, especially for wiring it, because I think you guys just cut it off right away. The drain is basically the ground, I believe. And then there's the gate, and then there's the source. You guys use that a lot for Airsoft. So that is the differences between bipolar junction transitions or transistors and field effect transistors. So with the bipolar junction transitions, the amount of current fed into the base the amount fed into the base controls the current flowing between the collector and the emitter. Okay. And then for a Phet, which is what we use, the amount of voltage applied to the gate controls the amount of current flowing between the drain and the source. I'm not an electrical engineer guy. I'm just taking these and reading it out to you guys. All right. On and off switches. This is a common thing that transistors do. Applying controlled amount of current and voltage depending on what transistors you're using, it can work as an amplifier. Applying a large current or voltage, and it will saturate the switch, and it will go on fully. So that's putting voltage in it, and that's on. Removing the current or voltage, and it will turn off, obviously. This functions as a base for all electronic switches. So on and off. And that also applies in computers as a logical 1 and 0s for binary. That's something that I do, but I'm not into electrical engineering though. All right, so advantages of using Mosfet. It requires little or no current to control the load. So that's a benefit because, like I said, when I was talking about triggers and arcing, like two metals together to get a contact, right? You require a full load on that, right? Versus with the MOSFET, you don't need a full load. You just need a contact, and then that'll start the circuit right away.
Mm-hmm.
MOSFETs are capable of switching very high current loads without generating much heat. There's your benefit right there. This allows for the use of MOSFETs to replace electromechanical relays and as well as high-speed, high-current switching. So it's good for Airsoft because you just want to go fast. Zip, zip, right? They could be much more easily scaled and much more or did I spell that wrong? Shoot, I did. Easier to mass produce. Sorry guys, I was like rushing to finish this. All right. So that's the advantages of the MOSFET. It's a small thing. It's a small switch, built in the 1960s, like invented in the 1960s, and then used in today's technology, and then used like it's basically a huge game changer for the electronic industries, like semiconductor transistors, MOSFETs. When this was all created back then, they had no idea what they were doing, and then afterwards, when microchips came along, my gosh, did it make a revolution in our technology age at this point. Yeah, again, look at your phone. That's basically like billions of MOSFETs and transistors in there, and that's what we're using in our Airsoft. In Airsoft, we're just using the tiny little chip that is only doing one thing, and that's only doing one switch on and off. And that's as easy as it gets. All right, so next slide, we're going to show you some examples of, this is back in 2009. This is public domain by Terry Fritz. This has been around for a while. I don't know if you guys have seen this before.
I think I've seen this
I
before.
have.
This is
This is a simple MOSFET circuit diagram of, you know, some electrical engineer guy, genius, would be like, why are we doing it? Why are we just wiring batteries to the motor right away? And we do it this way. You can see here.
Okay, before you get into this, I'm pretty sure what you guys see there is exactly what you guys think it is. When he says bolt on, oh my gosh.
Is there a history with this? Because I just pulled this up.
I'm getting some flashbacks right now.
Okay. You can see here, this is your drain. like I said, you guys don't use it. I've seen multiple diagrams saying that you guys don't use the drain, which is basically,
Mhm.
I think that's equivalent to having a ground, and you have your gate, which goes to the positive switch of the trigger, and then you have your source. That source, yeah, source, which then, yeah, completes the circuit right there. So it's pretty straightforward. You're not using a high amount of voltage
Hmm.
to get to your trigger. Your trigger acts as your MOSFET acts as your trigger mechanism now at this point to then run a high current through. Pretty simple, honestly. I that's the basis of it. I'm not a tech. You guys are gonna have to explain to me how this works.
This is an OG drawing.
Yeah, and then this is something more modern, which is from Ace Tech, Ace Mod Plus.
Mhm.
This one is a little bit more complex if you don't know what you're looking at, but they basically have a board with a MOSFET in it. There's a whole bunch of other chips in here, I'm guessing, as well, controlling a few things. But I'm guessing it's a little bit more advanced than a simple MOSFET now, because it looks like there's like 3 chips that they have on this board. Either way, it probably does the same basis. It controls the amount of voltage. It gives you that high voltage energy that you need to go to the motor right away. That is basically it for a little bit of a history on what MOSFETs are, where they come from, which is basically a semiconductor transistor, and what it's capable of. So, any questions from you guys? Because I probably won't be able to answer it because I'm not a certified electrical engineer or anything like that, but you guys know more than I do. I'm gonna stop it here, and hopefully that was helpful for you guys because close that. There we go. And yeah, so I'll give it to you, Tack, to continue on the discussion on do you need a MOSFET?
Hmm. All right. So, hey guys, let's get into our little bit of a discussion here. So we're just gonna go with number one, just going over what a MOSFET is when it comes to airsoft. Now, like we were just talking about, and Poi sort of demonstrating in the last few slides there, um, it's a simple switch, right? That's the easiest form. I know some people will be like, oh, wait, but your trigger is also a switch. Well, yes, your trigger is a switch, but your trigger technically is a mechanically controlled switch
Yep.
for your electronic system, if you get what I mean, right? While with the MOSFET, it's an electronic switch that's controlled by you mechanically pulling your, you know, right? So, anyways, point is that it's a switch, right? And it's super useful. Now, do you need one? I don't know. That's to say after we have our little discussion here. But when it comes to it, there's all kinds of MOSFETs when it comes to airsoft. Some people kind of get them confused with ETUs. I know a lot of the time people will quote an ETU, right? But
Mhm.
your most basic Phet is going to come to sort of what that first slide diagram that Poi sort of gave. What is it? The number is like T3093AB or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember seeing that number often because that's like your most basic MOSFET that you can sort of make. I know there's still tons of guides out there. David, I don't know if you ever went through going and making one or whatever it is. I've actually tried to make one myself just for shits and giggles, just to see how it works, right? And it's just like I would never want to have to put something that big, at least the one that I made that big, into an actual gun. Maybe an
Huh.
M249 or something like that, where there's like space, but like none of my M4, man.
And you're jogging my memory back to the days when MOSFETs started becoming a thing in airsoft.
Mhm.
Because when I started playing, MOSFETs didn't really exist. You just had basically your 2 trigger contacts. You
Mhm.
pull the trigger, it goes zip. The most that you had was, I think they're called inline MOSFETs, but basically they were like huge ass chips you had to put into the stock. You either had to plug it in or you had to solder it on. And then you had guys doing homemade FETs. I didn't really see circuit board FETs that actually replaces the trigger contacts until about think about 2000, 2010, 2011, around there. So it was a long time, but it's funny because we still have plug-in Phets and then inline Phets, which still keep the standard triggers or trigger contacts. And then you have mechanical Phets and then optical Phets and now magnetic and optical Phets. So they've kind of advanced, but they're still kind of the same in the sense they just, things work better now. I'm not an electrical engineer. I install stuff and I think they're cool and noodle around with them.
We yeah, definitely. It's more of like we get the right parts together and sort of just makes it work. It's less of a super science and more of just understanding how things kind of work.
Simplicity at work, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the most complicated one I ever had when I first started, and I thought it was crazy, was a plug-in burst MOSFET. And that was
it's the burst wizard. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So
exactly
the burst wizard, the nuke Phet.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What are some other ones? I know you used to get them off of like Brill Armory
or Evite.
like $50, right?
They were super cheap. It was like actually ridiculous. Like when you think about it, right? You sort of almost wish that they had things like that still available in like a relatively cheap format. Now some of them do exist, but throw in shipping and then boom, right? They're over $100 again.
I think I'd argue Parian Fest nowadays, and a lot of their lineup is relatively within that price range. And they're not super complicated to install too, which is really nice. You know.
Okay. So before we keep going on, we're just going to go over for our listeners here, sort of like a brief understanding of how sort of an airsoft gun works with a MOSFET. So, just as we were talking about earlier before, when the trigger is not pressed, the entire circuit is broken. So that means that there's no current flowing through it. Your gun is not queuing. However, when you start pressing the trigger and the trigger contacts touch, that's when you close the circuit, and that's when your whole motor starts spinning and your queuing action starts happening.
Is that without a MOSFET? I'm guessing that's a standard close on and off switch.
Exactly. This is without a MOSFET, and that's just with your trigger being, with your basic trigger assembly. So the electrical current travels through it, goes through the connectors, through the trigger contacts, and that's where you hear about this whole thing about electrical arcing happening. And that happens between the contact of your trigger contacts.
Is that they're not even touching and you're getting an arc, right? Is that how it is? Is that what you're calling an arc? Or?
Yes and no. If you're having arcing without them touching, it means your contacts are too close together, which means that the electricity is completing the current without you putting input in. They do arc when you do plug it in, and if you ever had an ICS, you could flip it open, you'd see sparks, basically, like a little lightning bolt fly across from time to time. Don't touch it, but that's kind of where arcing comes from. Or something's not grounded.
Is that also the side effects of the arcing is also in line with like carbonizing, or what is it?
So carbon buildup happens because of the fact that you got two conductive metals touching each other, but you also have electricity traveling through a non-conductive medium. Because we live and breathe on planet Earth, that happens to be air. So because of the air being that sort of barrier in between it, you're going to have that oxidation and that carbon buildup. And so when people talk about their trigger contacts failing and stuff like that, usually comes down to a person who has never opened their gun before. So most likely a non-tech savvy person who is completely abusive to their gun and spamming semi-auto. So that's all of you guys on the weekend. Because when you're actually pulling on full auto, the gun's a lot more efficient because the current is being constant. But hey, you don't get to full auto all the time at Panther, so sucks to be you guys. I'm sorry.
Noted.
What's full auto?
Yeah. So but with that said though, the constant spamming and stuff like that is you're going to constantly build up that carbon for guns that don't have those fancy cool triggers and stuff like that with the better resistance metals and all that other stuff that sort of makes it last just that little bit longer. If you got your simple, I think it's copper, right? There were copper trigger contacts. I've seen a couple of them. I can't remember if it's full copper or not, but
I think back in the day it was copper, and then you had either a silver coated copper conductor or just straight copper. And nowadays it's like, I think they're like silver.
Yeah, they're
most
silver
cases.
coated.
Yeah, most of mine are
silver-coated.
silver coated
Yeah.
nowadays. Yeah, I know that some of my old GMPs have the old copper trigger assembly
Mhm.
and whatnot.
Silver's
but,
expensive, you know that, right?
Yeah.
you know that's why it's coated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why it's coated.
All right. You got me there.
So
It's
with
discount.
that said, with the carbon buildup, right, that's when you're gonna have misfires happening. That's when things are gonna go wrong because the electrical current is getting interrupted, right? So that's where you're gonna have a lot of people going like, oh, my gun was shooting and suddenly it stopped working. And going through all the diagnosis, obviously your basic diagnosis all the time is gonna be checking the front end, the back end, pistol grip, and then after that your SOL, and you're gonna have to have it opened up. And with really old school guns, most of the time you just have to open it up and then it's take a brush, clean the trigger contacts. And if the person's happy with that and they were happy with the gun performing the way it was before, that's literally like, boom, $30. There you go. There's your gun. Right? Easy peasy.
You mean to tell me that that's how much they charge me just to...
That depends on who.
That depends on the issue. Yeah, I get it.
Well, so I'm being like super like I'm saying like if you bring like a super simple JG M4 that can open up no problem, yeah. But you start bringing in like ambi this, specialized this, things start changing after that, right?
Honestly, the breakdown probably takes more time than doing the work.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what kills me sometimes, and then that's what kills some people who watch me do stuff.
Don't buy Aries. Sorry.
all the ambi parts, all the little springs and stuff like that. Oh, but anyways, guys, so that's the basic gist of an airsoft gun shooting without a Mosfet. Now, to go into an airsoft with a Mosfet, the Mosfet introduces a element of control, right, which helps with the minimizing of damage to the trigger contacts in the most basic sense of the word. Like the one that Poi had shown, a lot of you guys are familiar with the more budget end MOSFETs where they have the signal wires. I know Leviathan, Gate, Haroon, and all those guys offer similar products as well as your old school Nukefets and Burst Wizards. Yeah, so the trigger contacts are, instead of being attached to the actual battery wires and high voltage wires, they're just attached to some 20 gauge or 22 gauge wires that's
very low volt, right?
Exactly, and all they are there is to detect that the circuit is complete, and Bob's your uncle. And then you have full power going to your motor, which means more RPS, more clean energy going to your motor. I'm talking bullshit right now just so I can keep you guys paying attention here. Okay. But yeah, so pretty much that's the gist of it with a MOSFET with an airsoft gun.
Isn't it also a fact that it's a constant current that's going to the motor instead of cutting it off from the trigger itself with the standard non MOSFETted gun, airsoft gun? When you have a signal wire, you complete the circuit, it goes through. It's a constant flow of energy that's not gonna cut off right away. And then with fancier gates and stuff like that, they have the sensors and stuff to make sure that it cuts off, right? Is that the basis? Is that what we're looking at here?
I'd say most modern smart style MOSFETs where you can program things, or where they replace the circuit board and have a signal wire, where the trigger basically is just to kind of complete the small signal wire circuit. The wires are live and primed. I've found this out a few times, at least with machine guns, when I'm essentially wiring the box mag into the circuit, and if I wire to the wrong positive, all of a sudden the box mag starts going and I haven't even fired the gun. It's because the wires technically are live. It's just such a low current going through it at that time that it doesn't actually move anything until you complete that circuit. Then all of a sudden it just snaps to life. They're kind of cool like that. At least that's how I understand it. There's always a flow versus like old school systems, which were, you open the gate and all of a sudden it's all the energy goes.
Yeah, and then you stop opening it or stop closing it. Basically, it just cuts off from there, and then there's no current going to the motor.
Yeah, you have systems that have active braking that also fire a reverse current into the motor.
Yeah.
to stop it even faster. That's usually when your
Oh.
like RPS is like stupid fast and you cannot physically or mechanically stop it. The only downside to active braking systems is it puts more stress on the motor. It actually eats your battery life faster, and it also introduces, I believe it's more friction in the current, so things heat up a lot faster versus if it's just consistent flow and it's going
Yeah.
one way.
Is
Yeah.
that like a chip for active braking, or is it just a
I'm not
is
sure
it
how it works. I'm
mechanical
sure
or
it's a chip.
gear?
It depends
No,
on which MOSFET
yeah.
you're using. For example, on the Prune MOSFET, there are certain chips on it which control active braking pre-cocking. So if you set it up where you want active braking and pre-cocking, and if you want it to a certain level, you could set it up as that. And then once it's set up, there's a memory, there's like RAM on
Mhm.
the MOSFET itself. It'll memorize the settings that you gave it, and every time you plug in the battery, that setting will kick in.
Mhm.
And once you pull the trigger, it memorizes the settings, and then it'll tell the motor, okay, this is what you have to do, pretty much.
Okay, so
And
these are a lot more advanced
they
than I
are,
thought.
they
So
are,
we should go to sort of the basic of a MOSFET, like
yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty basic. Like nowadays, when
Yeah.
it comes
that is
to
basic. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That is the standard these days.
Gotcha. So like
Yeah.
10 years ago when I heard about MOSFETs when I was playing Airsoft, I'm like, okay, so it was the very beginning there where you told me like, yeah, it has a current, like, there's a constant current that's happening, and
Yeah.
that'll be activated when your signal wire
Mm-hmm.
happens, and that's all I know from when I had my micro switch back then.
Yeah.
Is I
I
had a
remember-
signal wire, and then when you
Yeah,
fire,
you had the
it'll
old school.
Yeah.
Most old school Phets were basically just like, I don't know how to put it. They were just dumb. They didn't really do anything else other than
Yeah.
create a more efficient electrical current.
Yeah.
Most modern Phets have some programmability. I think the first two companies that I remember that really pioneered that, having the ability to do that with a trigger, was Black Talon Concepts when they were around, as well as Gate. And Gate was
Yeah.
one of the first ones out of the gate, so to speak.
Yeah.
Play on words.
Play on words.
That
Literally.
actually, yeah. They had like plug-in style ones originally that you plugged into any gun, and then you had a signal wire. All you had to do is resolder the trigger connector and the trigger contacts, pardon me, and that was pretty much it. And then they came out with their Titan series. BTC basically had drop-in complete replacements. I had one of their very first Specters, and I remember that very well because it was the first one that was just a complete trigger contact with no sort of like fuse system into the end of the wire or the big bulky sort of square pieces you had to shove in the stock tube. And sometimes those were like your programming units, and others it was part of the MOSFET. I don't know. I remember back in the day they were bulky, janky, and a huge pain in the ass. And nowadays you can do it in an hour, and all of a sudden your AEG works a hell of a lot better.
Like for example, Perun is in my opinion right now leading the innovation in a lot of MOSFET technology. Like for example, if you have a stock GNG, you could literally buy literally a tiny, like probably it's like 2x1 inch MOSFET and just plug and play, and practically that will help improve your stock GNG that you bought. Like Perun is making waves. Like their new system, their hybrid system is fantastic.
Yeah, I just dropped one into my SCAR with a magnetic trigger system. It's actually pretty impressive, and then its ability to program is it's pretty mind-boggling.
So what's the difference in a magnetic one and a standard like copper or silver one that contacts each other?
So I guess I'll just quickly go through this. I mean, I'm sure Raven's seen it too, but original MOSFETs, you had like standard contacts, which is what they would use. Some of them still do that right now, which is for cheaper alternatives, especially if you have something that's a bit proprietary. And then it went to the secondary, which was more of a mechanical system, which is what BTC used for the longest time, which is basically you had a tiny, it was like a small switch, basically like a micro switch. And every time you could physically feel it when you pulled the trigger, you could tap it. And if you don't plug in a battery, you can feel it click each time. Then it went to optical MOSFETs, which is essentially it's an infrared laser beam that would shoot across. And then when your trigger would interrupt it or something like that, it would immediately fire the signal. Now you have the magnetic system. I don't know how it works exactly, but from what I've read through the manual, basically you have a magnet that's on the trigger. It's a very powerful one, and all you do is it passes over basically, and because of the magnetic signature, it sets off the MOSFET, and then it completes the cycle. It's very impressive how it works, and it's super
And
simple.
if you're talking about magnets, can you get sensitivity out of it? Because I know for a fact that when you're dealing with magnets,
Yeah,
there is a profile in there that has a slope for
yeah,
sensitivity.
I think so. I don't necessarily know the details of it. I've gone through the manuals for the pair and hybrid FETs because it's the first one I've seen with a magnetic trigger system that actually works very efficiently.
Mhm.
And I would argue it's a lot better than optical FETs, mainly because if you have the issue of debris, which will always happen in a gearbox at some point, or grease and dirt and
Yeah,
shit
it's
flying
gonna
around,
block it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it
Gonna
won't
block it.
block it. So the magnet basically is to continue that process without issue. I think it uses a hybrid of both magnets and optical FETs, whereas optical FETs I always found during installation process, there's a lot more to pay attention to in terms of like the interaction between the parts. And they're very picky sometimes about the gears and other aspects, whereas this is just like stupid simple,
Yeah.
like
So
drop in.
what is
Yeah.
what is your preferred trigger sort of a mechanism for you guys then when it comes to, is it optical, is it like back to copper, silver, or magnetic? What do you guys like to use?
Well, Raven, you can go first on this one. I'm curious for you.
For me, I've installed a couple of V2 hybrids. I like the whole magnetic aspect of it. But right now, most of my guns I still run the hybrid, the Perun hybrid. I like it's super easy to install. It's drop in. But the thing is with hybrids, sorry, not hybrids, regular opticals is if you don't close off the gearbox properly, i.e., like
Mhm.
if there's a lot of light spillage into it, that could play
Mm.
a problem with optical. And I've had those experiences with the gate MOSFETs that ran optical in them. They would usually have problems with either light getting through the trigger
Mhm.
hole in the bottom or the bottom of the gearbox, and there would be problems every time you shoot if you don't seal it off properly. um Obviously I wouldn't go back to the traditional closed style copper
Yeah.
trigger system because it's really inefficient. You're killing your battery practically because you're just letting out so much current at the same time. So honestly, I would say I go with the optical, but sooner or later, I'm probably gonna change out like all the systems on my airsoft guns to a hybrid system because I feel like it's more efficient and there you have more uh there's a lot less chances of one part failing. For example, if the optical part of it is not working, then you have the magnets working in place to make sure that your airsoft gun is always working practically.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. What about you, David?
Um, I'm old school to some degree. I almost prefer. I wish BTC was still pumping out their Spectre Mark II series. Um, I like tactile systems, basically where it uses a button. And how many guns? I think I have 5 guns that have BTC Spectre Mark IIs with the whole Bluetooth programming. I haven't had any issues with them, and the longest one I've had now has been for almost 4 years, and it still goes. The other preferred one I like, which, pardon me, Raven was talking about, was the hybrid system with the magnetic trigger system. I prefer that too. It's the optical system has appealed to me, and I've kind of screwed around with them a few times. I do have one installed, and then I have installed more than a few Gate Titans. And he's right though, in terms of like the light coming in, that's always a huge issue in regards to them, and it can it can set your system off into sort of a haywire funk when you're dealing with it on the field. And I also find that when they get dirty, they're very inconsistent, and it's not a good time versus something that's a bit more crude, so to speak, that can kind of handle the gunk and the mud. I mean, that's kind of where my stance is on it. And yeah, don't go to old school contacts because they suck.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Don't do that.
What about you, Tack?
Oh, I hate to break it to everyone, but I'm fine with old school contacts.
I mean, as a non-tech, I think most of my
Uh,
guns are old school
uh,
contact. To be
uh,
honest, I don't get my guns modified as much. I only have
mhm,
two that have Mosfets on
Mhm.
it, and
mhm,
I mean, for a lot of regular folks like me, like who don't know how to tech stuff, yeah, I'm gonna stick with the manufacturer has until I start. If I wanted to develop into more of like a something that like something that I wanted a project gun on, yeah, I would
mhm,
probably spend money on it. But at this
mhm.
point, I'll buy the gun and then it's basically there for the looks. I think that's most airsofters at that point.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
everyone can agree with this because yeah, you go for the looks, you don't really go for what's under the hood.
Mm.
And if you do are going for what's under the hood, then it's gonna be you guys that are dealing with it because it's one of those
Well,
things where it's hard to get into.
that
One,
or like the more particular person, right? Like, cause like for me,
Mhm.
like right, my favorite, the one that I use the most, and my favorite one out of all the ones that I have right now, has no MOSFET in it, right? It's just straight power and go, right? When it breaks, right? When the trigger contacts melt, when
Whoop-de-doo
because
when.
right, because because this is what this is the argument that everyone always gets into, right? And it's just like, yes, right, and it always comes down to functionality for me, and just like how much you want to sink into something and how much you really care, right? Because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, right, if my BB hits the person and they call their hit, I'm happy, right?
Yeah.
So how that BB gets there, be it out of the mag while I'm around the corner, or my airsoft gun from across the field, exactly, boy, right? Yeah, I'm happy. So um yeah, like when that platform breaks, I'll probably think about getting one, right? There's tons of options out there. And it really comes down to what my bankroll is at the time, because of the fact that I have tons of options, right? But to be on a more serious note, right? It really depends on what platform I have, right? Like a lot of the specialty platforms, right? I'll probably pick the signal wire MOSFETs just because they're the ones that can stay to the actual proprietary system, like SchoolBoy was mentioning earlier. There's a lot of platforms like that, right? I know a lot of you guys just have M4s, only
That's it.
M4s, probably. Most of you
Mm.
guys, 90% of you guys. The rest of us, we got some cool guns, right? So with that said, right, things kind of get mushy and things kind of get different, right? And some of you guys who have HPA guns should know, you're like, hey, this doesn't fit in here. Oh no. Right? Need a new nozzle. It's the same. It's the same thing, right? So like, certain AKs, I might not get an optical MOSFET for it, just because of the factor that you guys pointed out, right? In my opinion, V3s have, in my experience anyway, I've had the most gearbox light bleed in a V3, just because they have a wider
Mhm.
trigger hole and everything like that. Light
Their
can get in.
trigger contacts are also more or less almost external than internal completely.
Yeah, and also
So
and it
yeah.
also
Yeah.
depends on which one you get. Like I've had some weird ones. Like I always like old school contact because it's so simple to diagnose. Like that's another thing that it comes down to, right? When it comes
Keeps
down to
you in
figuring out
business too.
problems. That too, right? But like it's super easy, right? And when I talk about with people when it comes to upgrading stuff, you always want certain points of failure. I know some people out
Mhm.
there who are gonna like try and roast me on that, but you know what? At the end of the day, if you have a part that you know is gonna break, but you can easily replace it, it's probably way easier to go with that than to build something super skookum and then something happened and you not know exactly where it went wrong. So like with that said, right, like there's so many different options, right? Like and we can get into that actually next, because there's so many different ones. I know some of you guys are talking about the Perun and stuff like that, and in my
Mhm.
experience I have messed with the hybrid one. Like Raven was saying and everything like that, I really like the magnetic trigger. Like I was impressed with it. The very first time I dealt with that was I was on the other end of it, right? And I'm just like, what the heck is this thing, right? And I'm like telling the kids, like, what kind of HPA gun you have, huh? And then he's like, oh, it's not an HPA gun, it's this. I'm
This
looking at it,
AG.
and then he breaks it the next week, right? Oh, you're just like all kids, right? So I happen to get to take a look at it and see what it is, and I see this thing, and I'm like, huh, all right. So I'm going through tuning it back up for him and putting it back together. And I'm shooting this thing. I didn't want to give it back. I was like, dang, okay. I see where it is. I also turned his RPS down because
Hmm.
my goodness. But yeah, you know, that's me right now. Like I don't really have one
Okay.
that I use. Right, I'm kind of bare bones. You know, love it or hate it. Right, like
Alright.
if it breaks, I will upgrade.
I guess I'll pose a question for you guys, and you guys can rip me apart, whatever. So, fact or not, if I use a Mosfet, will that save the longevity of my airsoft gun, like gears or motor, lipo batteries? Even that the rumor states that if we put a Mosfet in, it'll it'll make the gun better longevity wise, reliability wise.
Yeah, I want to say so. Until you start doing crazy stuff with it
Yeah.
in terms of like high tuning,
Mhm.
you just drop it in the stock gun.
Yep.
You get better
It works.
performance, saves your motor, saves your battery.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
So because
I mean,
yeah, go
it
ahead.
removes the stupid out of airsoft to some degree of just plugging in a battery and pulling the trigger until the gun kind of goes burp or just kind of fizzes out.
Mhm.
I mean, they're I hate to say it like this, they're smarter than most players when it comes to battery life. The MOSFET will cut off when the battery is too low, versus most airsoft players, if they just plug it in a stock gun, they'll run the battery until either the lipo is about to blow up or until it's completely dead in some cases. And now that lipo batteries are kind of the standard, like NiCads don't really exist anymore to the same degree.
Nope.
It's definitely a smart investment, I would say.
Hmm.
Yeah.
100%. Like when it comes to the like, I wouldn't say triangle, right? More like Venn diagram of
Yep.
chosen upgrades, right? Hop up, hop up,
Yep.
range,
Mhm.
hop up,
So that's first.
Yep.
Hop up. Gotcha.
Pop
Right.
up at the top.
right? And then somewhere in there, MOSFET, right?
Like, are we talking about top, like second place or third place, or what? What?
No,
are we
I mean it's in that bubbly mess of a Venn
Mhm.
diagram, you know, in that middle
Gotcha.
section.
It's-
But I'm just
you
saying,
get-
hop
It's
up.
part
hop up
of your
something.
daily nutritious diet, but it's
Yeah.
just there. Gotcha.
It's just
All
there.
We,
Yeah.
Can we get TAC to draw a TAC diagram eventually of his upgrade theory? It's not going to be a diagram. You know what it's going to be? It's just going to be a jungled mess, basically, of shit flying everywhere.
Airsoft Tac Talk version 2. Let's go.
Oh my god, it's more like it's gonna be that guy from Horrible Bosses where he's sitting there and he's just like.
Sticky
So-
notes everywhere, trying to figure out everything.
So, rip me apart on this one. When someone, I don't know if it's a marketing tool or anything. When an airsoft company says lipo ready, does that mean that there is a
Oh.
MOSFET in there, or what?
Oh my gosh.
What are we looking at here? Because, from my understanding, for you to, like, when you guys are saying, yeah, it saves the lipo battery, does that mean that the companies out there are just using that keyword to say, like they're selling it so that it's telling the players, hey, it's lipo ready. That means that there's a MOSFET in it. Is that true or
no.
not?
Raven, you go first because I'm gonna rant on this one.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a fancy marketing term what these airsoft companies use. Even on stock guns, you could use lipos, like,
Yep.
but you could use lipos on stock guns that don't have MOSFETs. So when they say lipo ready, they're just saying, oh, hey, look, we have a tiny little chip in here that kind of regulates the flow of current. Yeah, our gun is lipo ready, but next thing you notice, it burns out because it's a cheap chip. And or either the wiring is cheap and that burns out, and then practically you're like, wait, what's that burning smell like in my gun?
I love it. Yep.
Or even the motor even burns out just
Oh my
because.
god, I got a bunch of horror stories about that shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's just bad that they keep saying,
Yeah.
oh, it's lipo ready. It's
Very
practically
misleading.
luring them in, like
Mhm.
luring the new players in. They're like, hey, come to us, here's the free candy, we're giving you free
Yeah.
candy. But little do they know, like, these MOSFETs aren't high quality. Like,
No,
all
they're like dirt cheap.
Yeah,
they're so bad too.
they're so cheap, and they put it in like just so they could put that on their boxes. It's like,
looks pretty.
It looks pretty. It's just like nowadays every airsoft box has hop up on it. You guys seen this?
Yeah.
Or
It's
the
like hop up.
tag. the
Yeah.
tag on the fucking trigger wheel.
It says
yeah.
hop up. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, ooh, so cool. Every gun, I'm like, dude, every gun has a hop up now. It's not like
Yeah.
before where it's just like
Not like the
shooting down.
90s.
Yeah,
I-
exactly.
man.
Like,
I got such a gripe to pick with a lot of companies too in terms of internal MOSFETs. I've had 2 guns given to me by friends to test out, and I managed to blow them out both in a day just from running it. And I think the one that I remember the best was GMP came out with their i5 series with their transformer, which was like that super cool. Like you could change the front end super quick with just like a throw of a lever, and it was like an AR-15 based platform. And they advertised the shit out of this sort of their i5 gearbox, which I thought at the time I was kind of sold on. I'm like, this is kind of cool. You got a quick change spring in the back that's on the top. You don't need to pull anything out. You just open the receiver, pop it out, put a new one in. And then they had 2, you had the main trigger board, and then you had the Phet, which was in the rear. Now, the kicker was there was a single piece of non-electrical paper between the Phet and the gearbox. So you can imagine what happens when it heats up enough, it would melt, and then all of a sudden the Phet would arc and the whole thing would catch on fire. And I remember testing Buddy's transformer out. He's like, this is super cool. I've only used it once. Test it out. Let me know what you think. And I came back to him like, dude, I lit your gun on fire in an hour. This thing's a piece of shit. It makes me so mad when companies slap on Phets just for the sake of it. And granted, I think there are some companies that are actually trying. I think Crytek is one of them that actually does a half decent job at making Phets.
Yep.
And then the other one, oddly enough, and I hate saying this, but Ares is actually attempting to do a good job with internal Phet systems.
Yeah.
Which is shocking.
Yeah.
But some of their technology is a little bit behind. But it's better than their stock micro switches, which is what they originally had, and a lot of their mechanical stuff is just poop.
Yeah.
But 100%, it's a marketing scheme. And there's like LCT says all their guns are lipo ready, and they're like they're not even, they don't even have Phets.
No.
Well, so okay, so let's talk about this, right? Because I run into this problem the most when it comes to people coming to the field and then saying that their gun's not working. And it usually comes down to a battery incompatibility, right? Hey, my gun says it's lipo ready. I bought a 7.4 because so-and-so store locally said to have a 7.4. Well, yeah, I can't say the name. You know who you are. But you know, they told me a 7.4 is gonna work with this thing, no problem. It's a 7.4 lipo. My gun says lipo ready. I'm good to go. I played one game and now my gun won't work. What's going on? Right? Like I run into that problem like all the time, and it comes down to like I think Tony mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I'm not afraid to say it. G&G has some really crappy basic stock MOSFETs, right? To the point where, like their ETU, right? Their basic ETU that they have is actually a pretty good bang for your buck. If you pair that with the cool thing that we were talking about earlier with the Perun, where they have the ETU upgrade, literally throw that MOSFET out, spend $75, $50, somewhere around there. I think
it's $50 now.
Something like that. If you can get one of the older ones, I think it's like $50. The newest one, it's the Plus, it's like $75. Literally plug and play, boom, you get pre-cocking, you get all these cool like everything, even binary, not allowed at Panther, by the way, but hey, cool anyway, right?
I have a funny story about that, about the GNG ETUs. This was a couple of years back. My buddy bought a RK74, you know, those GNG
Oh
AKs.
my god, yeah, I know what those are.
Yeah. So what happened was his MOSFET actually first what happened was the piston got destroyed, the teeth like gone.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and what happened was, because he tried, like, he didn't know a lot about like teching back then. This was before when I started like really getting into it. I knew some things, but so what happened was he burnt his ETU also. So he couldn't find it locally. So what happened was he got a new piston and he got a new ETU, installed it into his gun, and shot a couple rounds, and it burnt up the ETU.
Because it was the MOSFET.
Yeah, it's because the way that the ETU was built, it just kept burning up every time he put either a 7.4 or 11.1, just because it couldn't handle it, even though it said that it's
It was ready for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to hear
Rated
this?
for it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's lipo ready.
That's actually a funny story. I had that recently as well with the dad. Brought his kid's gun in. He plugged it in. The fuse popped right away. I was like, okay, well, let's just see what's going on. Plug it in again. Fuse pop. Trying to figure it all out, all the way to the point where it kept blowing up, and it's because of something like somehow the wiring got mixed up somehow. I have no idea what happened, but regardless, like, it turned into a piece of crap, and I couldn't decide if it was the ETU or if it was the MOSFET, and it ended up being trash. And to replace that set itself is like $58, which at that point, right, you need to talk to yourself and decide where you want to throw that $58. If you want to wait another week and maybe get something else, because like we're just saying right now, it's not
Oh,
it's not that great.
I forgot to mention, so that ETU, he couldn't get it locally, so he had to order it from Evike.
Yep.
And
Oh,
in the end, he spent nearly around
Probably $100, right?
$400 just trying to get it fixed, and even up till now, it's not working at all. So it's just
my
a shell.
God.
Yeah,
So-
no, and that's another problem that I don't know if you guys run into as well, but it's like the labor, right? To figure out and find a problem. A lot of the time, right? Unless you want to work on your own platform and actually put that time into figuring out a problem and then being like, hey guys, FAQ here, this is one thing that I've run into, and added to the list of known problems online. It's really hard and probably just easier to replace it.
To be blunt too, MOSFETs are particularly difficult to diagnose if you have issues. I'm sure the two of you have had problems with gate tightens.
Yup.
I've had a few that took me about an hour to 2 hours to figure out what was going on, and I had all the software to screw around with it. I'm like, this thing's pardon my language, but this thing's a piece of shit. I just couldn't get it to actually read correctly. And it was to the point where I had to contact Gate on one of them. I'm like, hey, like, I've done all this. I followed your troubleshooting. What the hell's going on? They're like, oh, well, what model is it? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. It's still under warranty. We'll send you a new one. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
That's it. Oh yeah, they're like,
we'll give you a warranty. That's it.
Yeah.
We'll replace it.
So like
Only took
quality
another 2 weeks.
quality control is not like something that's looked after in the industry. Is that what it is? Because it seems like
yes
when you
and
guys are talking about like MOSFETs on like pre-installed guns already, like companies installing it themselves, it seems like they're using, of course they're going to use the cheapest parts because they want to manufacture it the cheapest possible.
Well,
is that a thing, or?
Well, to be fair, like, I'll say this much: for Gate does do good QC for the most part. They do have a decent warranty program.
Yeah.
My gripe with them is their price structure. I think their Titans are a ripoff, and then you have to buy all this other crap just to be able to use the Phet or access some of the features.
Yeah.
It's a
which
pay to
I
win
think is-
system.
Yeah, it's so dumb. It's so dumb.
Yeah, from a customer perspective, unless you're a person, unless you can go to a tech to get it done, to get your gun done, right? Getting the
Who has
basic
all that
kit is
stuff?
to get a basic kit is going to pigeonhole you into getting their programming card and then everything else. So essentially, if you're going to get a Gate, you're going to spend over $250.
I mean,
to unlock all the features.
You want the advanced kit.
It's ridiculous. You pay $200 for the Titan alone, and then in order to get all the features, you have to pay an extra $70 to $100.
Yeah, just to unlock
it all.
Yeah,
if
which
you-
is
if you wanna
really
get
So
the-
dumb.
And
Is that a software lock, or?
yeah, it's a software lock.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a software
No.
lock.
Yeah,
And
they have-
also, if you wanna like for example, to actually somewhat like tune it properly, you have to get the USB adapter, so you could wirelessly or either connect it via your Dean's or Tamiya connectors to your phone, and that's how you diagnose it. But like what everybody else is saying, there is a paywall. Like there is a paywall to try and like if you want extra features on it, you have to pay. If you want extra like diagnosis on it, you have to pay.
You have to pay.
Which when anybody who comes to me, they're like, oh, I want to get a Gate Titan, I would just recommend them and tell them like, hey, okay, you could get a Gate Titan. These are the advantages and these are the disadvantages of it. I tell them what things they do, and I tell them, hey, for this certain model of the Gate Titan, you practically have to pay more just to unlock more. While as let's say, for example, Perun or either Jeftron, like the Leviathans, you could just buy them and they come with all these features practically there ready to use.
Yeah,
So
you can do it all
that's
yourself.
exactly.
Okay, so Gate Titan, like a lot of people talk about it saying it's the best, but from the text perspective, it's the other way around, where you're locked
well,
in a pay one, or is it still good?
well,
Honestly, I wouldn't say it's the best. I'd say that's a really clever marketing scheme. It's on par with everything else that's out there.
yeah,
The only reason it air quote is the best is literally because people see price tag and it's expensive. So they go, "Oh, this must be super good."
Yeah.
And it's like you're paying. You can buy a Perun Phet for $120 and you get the same features and you don't have to buy all the other shit. And then the nice thing about Peruns, if you're one of those people who's not super tech savvy and you don't want to download apps on your phone or program it through your computer, you can do it through the trigger system with, they give you like a little card.
Yeah, they
that
give
tells
you a
how to
card.
program the whole thing.
yeah.
It's great.
like a
You can
poker
do
card.
it right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super easy.
So, because I like there's a couple things there, and it's true because I agree with what Dave's saying on a couple of those things, but Gate got their name because they're one of the older ones around, and they were able to do a very professional, clean job of what they're doing. Is it the first one I'm going to recommend to an airsoft player? Probably not. Is it the one that's always talked about and brought to my attention? Yes. But I'm going to say this now. Most of the features that are available on a Gate, you guys aren't even going to use. Half the people that I have tech guns on who have told me, "Oh, I got a Gate Titan in this and I have it all tuned up and everything." And I just look and it's like auto everything. It's like nothing was touched.
Yeah.
Like you paid this guy money to just put this in and then right,
Not even tune it.
because you don't even know what you're looking at, right? So it's like
And
don't fall for that gimmick, right?
Well, I mean, if you want an alternative to like Gate Titans, if you're just going to use it at a very basic level and quote say it's tuned up, just buy a Gate Aster.
Yeah,
they're extremely cheap.
Exactly, they're like $50 to $75. Oh no, they're $100. They're like $100.
They're $100.
Is this the most basic Mosfet you can get? Then?
Oh yeah. They're like
it's their basic.
It's one of the
optical trigger.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's a shitload easier to install too than the Titan because you don't have basically the two board system. You have just a single board.
Yeah.
And once it's in and it's good to go. But yeah, it's it's dumb proof. You just drop it in and you play.
Yeah.
That's it.
But going on that, if you're planning to get an Aster, which is around $110, including shipping and everything, honestly, if you're getting something for an M4, just go for a Perun V2.
Yes.
The tuning on a Perun V2 is so much simpler than on an Aster. Because on an Aster, you have to look at the lights and you pretty much have to go off that. While in a Perun V2, you literally just pull the trigger and the amount of pulls equal to what setting you want. You hold it, and then you could change the level of that tune of that certain setting, and that's pretty much it. And you could even do it on the fly. If you remember, like me, if my gun is not feeding properly, it could be a pre-cocking issue. Like my pre-cocking could be too high. I would just flip the fire control and pretty much just go on from there, and then tune it on the field on the go. And then when it's feeding properly, then I'm back in the game. I don't have to whip out an app or anything like that on my phone to edit it, or I don't even have to if I really wanted to, I keep the card on me. That's in case if I need further diagnosis on the field. But pretty much I just memorize which setting is which, and that's pretty much it. Like no need to be like, okay, yo, cover me. Let me whip out my phone. Okay, let me load up the Titan app, or either even the Jeftron, the Leviathan, the Bluetooth app, anything that's has to do on the phone. It takes time. And that time that you're spending diagnosing what's going on with your Mosfet or your gun is time wasted, because you could be just having fun, and instead of wasting time and be like, oh no, my gun's not working, now I have to go back out and then have to take it to TAC or something like that to get it fixed.
I'd say this much: the one thing I like about the Peruns is they've gone back to basic with their programming systems. Whereas like everybody else, I remember when the first Bluetooth systems came out, both with Gate and with BTC, and it was super cool at the time. as a tech, it's neat when you're doing it in a controlled environment. You really want to see how everything is flowing. It's great for like detecting things like electrical draw, basically amperage, and to give you an average count essentially for like what the pull is. So it's very good for technical side of house. So it's great for techs, but for the average dude, not so much. And then, I mean, like Raven said, I'm going to comment on, compound on what he said. Essentially, if you have to pull your phone out to program your AEG on the field, you need to do it in a controlled environment. It's not something that's worthwhile versus having something that you can do on the fly, especially with less input. It's a lot better. And then some of the apps too, like I think the Jeftron app for a while was it was really poopy when it first came out.
It was buggy. I remember that.
It had bugs in the level, and same with the BTC app. I'll say that much too. Their consistency with staying connected to the Phet was a huge problem at times. You almost had to put your phone right next to your AEG.
Yeah, exactly.
To just be able to, either because of the magnetic interference from the motor, or the other one I think is just the thickness of both the gearbox shell as well as the receiver.
The lower, yeah.
Yeah, it's so silly. So I mean, it makes more sense. And then like with Gate Titans, where you have to plug them in sometimes to like your phone or your computer, I think it's an oversell point. It looks cool and it seems cool, but I don't know, it's really useless. Just go with simple systems. It's a lot better.
Well, so on that, like it to me, those kinds of things are bells and whistles for someone who sits building guns all the time, kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
for us.
It does
it's not good in field.
Yeah, there's like we were saying, right? Like if you buy the expert kit, right? Like you're what are you utilizing really, right? Most people only need like the basic system and whatnot, and then by then, like we were talking about, we're probably going to recommend other MOSFETs that Gate has, right? Even just their basic Warfet and some of the other ones that they have might be a better choice for you, right? Not only space wise, right, but as well as just cost wise and everything like that. Another one, like you were saying before, is like the Leviathan ones. I actually like those ones as well, just because of the micro switch that they have on there, right? So for all the ones who really love Polar Stars and the way they rapid fire, you can get sort of like the same sort of feel.
Same feeling. It's tactile too, so you can feel it.
Exactly.
Fun fact: Leviathans are a clone of the BTC's original Specter system. They took the same system and kind of copied it over and made a different variation of it. They're good though. And it keeps it alive because BTC kind of went poof. So
yeah, unfortunately, they are one of those guys that like they still pop up here and there, and
no, it's
still
one
have
dude.
their guns.
It's one dude who makes.
It's one dude.
Well, that's what I mean. Like I see the posts come up once in a while. It's like, hey, I was able to get a warranty. Hey, does anyone know where this guy is to get a warranty? And then a couple people talk about, hey, 2 months ago he replied to my email. So
I think for him it was a passion project, and then he got too big for his own good. And then it just was too much for him to handle. I don't know, like he just kind of ghosted like 2 years ago, because he had his generation 3 BTC Phet, which was coming out, which was an optical hybrid, which was really cool. And he did send a few out to people for testing, and that was it. And I remember that kind of went the waywards of the dodo. And then I kind of started drifting more between Gate and Perrin when they came out. And then Perrin just kind of like blew me out of the water, both for price and performance. I was kind of shocked about that.
Yeah, exactly. They're
and their customer service is really good.
Perrin. Oh yeah, it's solid.
It's solid. It's like I had a problem. I remember this was like last year or so. One of my clients' gun was acting up, and they were just spamming the living crud out of their Perun, and they pretty much just killed it. So I was like, hey, is it possible to get a new unit and all that stuff? And then they're just like, oh yeah, just take a picture of what looked damaged, and then pretty much sent it to them. They're like, okay, no problem, we'll send you a new one. And that's pretty much it. Like they're like, here's the problem. And they're just like, if you can break down what do you think happened to the gun and all that stuff.
Okay, that's good.
I had something similar happen where the top of their optical Phet board was problematic, and one of the sensors wasn't actually picking up the signal of the infrared light flying across. So I sent it back to them, and they sent me a completely new Phet. And when I just asked them for the top board,
exactly, they sent the whole thing.
And
the funny thing is, they actually sent me a ETU, like the small, the really small one. They're like, hey, by the way, since you've been a customer of ours, because like mostly nowadays, I just tell people, okay, this, if you want a really good MOSFET for like bang for buck, literally bang for buck, get a premium V2 or V3. And then obviously I order through Airsoft parts, and they're really good guys. They send out really quickly. But yeah, on I tell Perun like, hey, I tell my clients to get your MOSFETs and all that, and they're like, yeah, thank you for giving us service and all that stuff, and for that we'll send you a small gift. And I was like, oh, what's this small gift? I found out they sent me a whole entire V2 and also one of those small ETUs for the GNGs. So I was just like, man, these guys' customer service is like excellent.
Yeah,
like,
they care.
way beyond.
They really care.
Yeah, they really care about their clientele and all that. Like,
But that's good. That's good, because definitely I've had hit and misses with certain brands when it comes to people getting back to them, and obviously could be the same issue that the BTC guys were having. But to just circle back into the live text box chat that we have here, one of the guys was just asking, and this will be a question for you guys as well, is a lot of people say that 11.1 batteries in stock guns are okay. Is that true?
Yes and no.
Are we talking about with MOSFETs or without?
Without. So like
Okay.
yeah. So like stock gun, so no MOSFET, right? When I say
it's a yes and no. So yeah, you can plug in an 11.1 and it'll work, and you can do things with it too. Just be mindful too, depending on what you're using. I don't want to go into the whole semantics of it, but I'll put it this way: 11.1s are kind of the peak performance of what you'll get out of a battery before you go into like RC type batteries, which will they'll burn things out 100% like very quickly. 11.1s are kind of pushing that threshold, and then depending on what kind of abuse you're doing, whether you're spamming the trigger like crazy or running full auto, you can guarantee you'll burn out your gun a lot faster if it's stock.
So what's burning? When you're saying burning out, what's burning out? Are you talking about the motor, or are you talking about the battery?
Usually the trigger contacts, but generally what goes before the trigger contacts is the piston. But if you're lucky, your piston will stay around, and then your trigger contacts will poop out, and maybe your motor too. I haven't seen a motor poop out in a long time because motors have improved, unless you buy GMPs, because they still use shit motors. But like most G&Gs will deal with an 11.1 relatively well, and then eventually they'll just kind of crap out.
Yeah.
So it's it's one of those risks that you take, versus if you use a 7.4, for example, it'll last a lot longer, and the rate of fire obviously is slower. So
from my experience, the 18K OG G&G ones will work with an 11.1. I haven't worked with an 11.1. But I've also had the motors burn out really easily from running 11.1s as well. Some people will be like, oh no, it wasn't the motor. It's like, nah, I got a stack of motors that have concluded that it was the motor. And then I have other guns, that rock the 11.1s as well. And it comes down to the same thing too, right? Where I was mentioning before, where you can have a gun where it doesn't work, right, with a MOSFET with a 7.4. But let's say if you had the stock trigger assembly, it would work with the 7.4. Mind you, the rate of fire would be, probably like 20% or 30% less than 11.1 or something like that.
I think it's like 20 to 25, somewhere around there.
Right.
It depends on the cell discharge, really, is what's important.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, right, like sometimes upgrading to certain MOSFETs isn't always the best thing. But that, I mean, like some of the ones that come in certain guns are really, really crappy, and it is what it is. Because when you can get a gun to work on a 7.4, it's really nice because, hey, you save on battery space.
Well, 7.4s are comparatively speaking similar to 9.6s. Basically, they have a good consistency of flow. And the reason why motors burn out so quickly, like I think it's a good thing that we just kind of put it out there, is your motor likes energy. If you've got basically just a standard stock wiring harness, you damn well bet that motor's going to try and suck up as much juice out of that battery as quickly as possible. So it does fry the system a lot faster. Versus if you have a MOSFET, there's a little bit more control with the flow, and it's not just spikes of energy. You'll notice, I mean, I think it's really cool because if you take a voltage meter and you plug it in, you plug it into a stock AEG and then just plug in an 11.1, and you'll see every time you pull in semi-auto, the energy draw from the battery is not the same. Sometimes it's really high, sometimes it's really low, and
It's
it kind of goes up and
inconsistent.
down.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Super inconsistent. But your motor wants to pull as much out of that as possible, and depending on your wires, the resistance, the current.
Position of
Yeah.
all the stuff inside.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. That's why gearboxes lock up a lot on 11.1s too, because guys tend to pull the trigger faster than the motor can respond, and then
Yeah.
So when you're
Yeah.
cutting it on and off on a regular switch, not a MOSFET, it's just
Mhm.
you're basically
That's
running
why
that risk.
Yeah, that's why MOSFETs like save you on semi-auto a lot more. Like, and the thing is, they'll give you that trigger response that you so crave in many situations, and it kind of spares you from basically doing the fumble error, which is overloading the mechanical system, because it can only deal with so much.
Okay. As far as a battery, like we're talking about 11.1s, is it true that if you use a MOSFET and use a lower battery, would that be better for longevity? And as well as like, because now you're getting a constant power flow, are you still going to get the same sort of power as without a MOSFET on it? Or is it different?
In
Because
theory, yes. So in theory, if you take a 7.4 and you plug it into a MOSFET, it'll go a lot longer than an 11.1 would, just because of like
It's
lower amperage draw.
Yeah.
Yeah, lower voltage. So you're not putting as much energy through the system. Like the more juice you put through it, the more abuse you put through it is the nice way to
Yeah.
put it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you guys find yourself going to 7.1s, or is it still always 11.1s for you guys, even with the MOSFET?
You go first on this one, Raven.
Okay, so for a majority of my AEGs, I just run 11.1 because my AEGs they all run MOSFETs, so and they're built to spec, so they could handle running 11.1 for.
So you are LiPo ready.
Yeah, I'm truly LiPo ready.
Should make a patch.
Yeah, LiPo ready.
Yeah.
But like for example, on my DSG build, which I'd recommend not really trying to build if you're not new. If you're new to teching, don't build it.
Please don't.
Please don't. You might have a wall in your hole because the spring is super heavy. And you might for example, for my DSG build, I pretty much have to it runs on 11.1, a regular 11.1. But I also use RC batteries to run that, and
like 30 amp, I'm guessing. 35.
Yeah, like the high pusher ones, like the really the high voltage ones, and it's really great on semi. Like semi response is just like instant. Full auto, on the other hand, I have to slow it down, but I don't use it on full auto at all because even on semi, it's just perfect. But once you plug that in to a regular airsoft gun, it literally will blow it up. So stay with an 11.1. And also I think that's another thing we forgot to mention is that a lot of MOSFETs nowadays come with fuses. They come with fuses. So practically if you plug in a super high outputting battery, what's going to happen is that fuse is going to blow, and that's practically going to save the whole system. Or if there's an overcharge or anything, the fuse is going to blow. So there won't be damage towards your MOSFET or to your motor. It's a redundancy system.
It's a good safe system too.
Yeah,
I know a lot of Phets have smart fuses built into them, and you can turn them off, but don't keep them on.
Yeah,
keep them on.
Because all of a sudden, if you get a huge charge, the Phet will just turn off, and it saves itself, and it saves your gun, and it saves you from having a nice little fire in your stock.
That's one of the benefits also for running a MOSFET is a lot of modern MOSFETs nowadays do have that built-in amp or fuse, and they also have the actual physical fuse itself that's attached to it's on the positive. So once
the Perrins do that.
Perun does that. So once a high current passes, if for example, if you're spamming semi all the time, like super fast or even full auto, and if the current is way too much, what's going to happen is your gun's just going to stop shooting. And if you take that fuse out, you'll see that the arc is blown. So there is literally a physical gap in between. and that's practically there to save your gun. So you have two fail safes, like the first fuse and then the digital or whatever fuse on the MOSFET itself.
They're basically car fuses too, so they can handle quite a bit of amperage draw before you actually blow them. I've only managed to blow one, but that was me kind of pushing the limits. Yeah, and kind of like you, I run RC batteries in my machine guns for obvious reasons, because it likes energy and I like full auto. So naturally that kind of goes hand in hand. But in terms of like longevity and things like that, I've definitely had a lot of success, at least with the builds. And going back to like Boy's comment, like what kind of batteries do I use? I spec everything for 11-1. That's kind of like my standard. I think for the average person, you should either aim between 11-1 or 7-4. 7-4 definitely gives you a lot more safety and redundancy with keeping your AEG for a little bit longer, especially if you're on a budget. And at the same time too, I think Titan batteries, like their 7-4s are actually very impressive. They're not
lithium
like
ion.
lithium polymers. Yeah, they're a lot better in terms of like the type of battery that they are. But the kicker too is they actually do have a decent cell discharge rate, so you can actually get a comparable rate of fire out of them as well. I think Negative Airsoft does something similar with his tech builds between 11-1s and 7-4s. He aims for like sort of a balanced performance, which I think for the average person is kind of what I aim for, because 11-1 builds, generally speaking, are like what you call like peak performance or at the very top. And you're obviously going to take a little bit more abuse to the system. You know, it comes with inherent faults, and there's a good chance that things will burn out a lot faster. That's just how that goes. But it shouldn't happen rapidly. It should happen over a progression of time. It all depends on you and how abusive you are. And yeah, DSG builds, don't do them.
Yeah, don't do them. Don't do them.
Don't do
them. Don't do them. You're gonna go through a lot more parts than what you think before you finally get it tuned down.
Yeah, all those YouTubers that have DSG builds, what they don't tell you is how many batteries they go through on a game and how many times they replace pistons and parts internally, because those things chew up everything.
No matter how strong the piston
we're talking
is.
about gears at this point now, right? Like gears, pistons.
Yeah, like mechanical parts.
Mechanical parts, okay.
Even if the MOSFET is there to
I was gonna ask that.
Even if the MOSFET is there to protect the overall integrity of the gun, still you're pushing your airsoft replicas or guns to
its limits.
Yeah, to the absolute limit of what they were made for.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. When you start getting into that factor, now you're starting to get into the mechanical structure, the mech box, and then from there you're getting into the quality of the parts and stuff like that. Like when you start stepping up over in my opinion, what everyone seems to get hung up on is going over 30 RPS. But in all honesty, if you start going over 25 RPS, that's when you start getting into like, how long will my gun last? Will these parts kind of, work and stuff like that? There's going to be people out there who will argue against me and just say, just throw these parts in and you're good. Or if you do it right the first time, it's always going to be good. Honestly, sure. But you know what? I deal with people, all the time on the weekend, and nothing's perfect.
Hey guys, remember, it takes one BB. Takes one BB
to hit someone.
To hit someone.
So let me pose this question to you guys then. As far as upgradability goes, should people focus on the mechanical aspect, the gears, and the motor, or go to a MOSFET right away instead of gears? Because a lot of people coming from the old days would be like, oh yeah, no, the gears, the ratio, motor speed, do those first. And then there's people who be like, okay, do MOSFET first because that'll save you a lot more, right? Instead of the batteries, right? We're talking about the gears now, right?
Yeah, I'm one of those older guys from back in the day, so I know exactly where you're coming with from this one, because that's what I used to recommend to people when I worked in the shop. Nowadays, I'll recommend dropping a Phet first. It gives you more for less, and at the same time, there's less issues basically with changing it out. Then you just slowly upgrade the system, but it's also a good base to work with. I don't know what it's kind of like the old proverbial saying way back in the day, where if you wanted more accuracy, you put in a Type bore. I know it's kind of a controversial topic, but it makes a lot of sense now to kind of just drop in a MOSFET, because there actually is inherent performance increase with them.
Yep.
So it it changes things. And I was one of those people, believe it or not, who didn't believe in Phets for a long time because of how shitty they were back in the day. And then when I
Times have
bought my
changed.
first,
You had
Yeah.
a right to be.
100%. And I mean, I hate saying this, but I have 2 airsoft guns right now that don't have Phets in them, and I don't quite use them right. Actually, no, I have one. Pardon me, one, and that's my AK. My RPD even has a Mosfet in it. Every single one of my airsoft guns has a Mosfet at this point, and it's kind of a go-to in my cart when I upgrade something. So yeah, why not put it in? It's a good, worthy investment. It's a hell of a lot better than dropping in gears right away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. A lot of people seem to get hung up on like the internals. What can I do on the inside? Hey, what can I smack up into this thing? It's like focus on your externals first. And by that, I don't mean your external, like accessories. I mean like the external parts, like, your barrel, your hop up, even your motor, right? Because when it comes to most M4s and your motors, they're easily replaceable. Not so much with your
Mhm.
V3s, but again, still kind of like the same concept. Right? When you get into other airsoft guns, that's different. But like, yeah, you want to do that, and then certain Phets, like even the most basic one, like the AB Nano ones or whatever it is, where
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just add the two. You just have to plug it in, pretty much. That's all you do. You
Mhm.
plug it in, and it's the barrier between the battery
I
and your
have
gun.
that.
Mhm.
I have that. It's
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
an easy little little switch
Yeah.
that plugs into your battery,
Exactly.
and that, like, for me, over like, I don't even know, like almost like 8 years I've been using it. That's saved my gun
Mhm.
so many times just from like bad batteries or
Mhm.
everything there is to it. And yeah, no, that was back in the old days though.
I have another thing. So going on to motors and all that stuff. Uh Nowadays there are motors that are coming out with MOSFETs built in.
That's gonna be a whole nother topic.
Yeah,
Brush
but
this, brush this, brush
but
this,
let's
Hold on, hold
redact
on, hold
that
on.
for
Let
now.
let
Hold
let
on, hold
let
on.
let him finish. I want to hear this because I actually haven't heard of this.
No, he's
Yeah.
not wrong, actually. Yeah.
So there are MOSFETs that are coming out with sorry, motors coming out with MOSFETs installed on them.
Raven, you're gonna make me spend $300, aren't you? Damn you.
Yo, get the
Okay.
brushless motor.
Uh,
Okay, so
all right. Give me
Do
give me the lowdown and benefits of why we should get it,
so
and then the disadvantages afterwards.
it's expensive. Disadvantage first.
Okay,
uh,
done.
but if you want to get something like that, it's still, I believe, it's still kind of it's an infancy stage. So yes, there are great performance benefits to it. Putting that in, it's just if you don't know what it is exactly, and if you don't know what a MOSFET is, then in my opinion, you shouldn't be putting that part in because for example, I had this one client of mine who bought a Warhead Industries
Oh, yeah.
motor, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm just gonna install this," and he had a MOSFET in his gun also. So
Yeah, MOSFET in the motor and in the gun. Yeah,
Yeah.
Let me
that's
put a
bad combo
MOSFET
right
in your
there.
MOSFET, and then
Yeah,
have
yeah.
the MOSFET your MOSFET.
Let me turbo your turbo.
yeah, let me turbo your turbo. Let me put a supercharger on that. So that didn't end up like there was always conflicts between the MOSFET and the motor itself. So right away when he plugged it in, pretty much guess what happened?
Right it.
Kaputski. Yeah.
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 It's if people don't know what they're doing and they're just guessing off, they're like, oh, like what Tax said, they're like, oh, it's an expensive part, I must get it. If you don't know and don't know, do the research on the certain part, don't do it. Including nowadays that uh the airsoft industry, also the airsoft tech industry, is slowly improving. There's a lot of new things that are out in the market that are really nice looking on paper, but if not properly looked into, you could end up
Mhm.
spending more repairing your whole entire system than just looking up on the internet and be like, does this part work with this part? Or even just ask your local tech. Ask them, would a MOSFET work with a MOSFET?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
then
you
he
got to
would
check
be
compatibility.
exactly.
Exactly. Right.
I mean,
And you're so right on that. No, go
I'll
ahead.
kind of reach out and comment on that one too, because his point in bringing that up is actually a good point.
Mhm.
For me, for the last little while, with my buddies back at VCC or Viking Combative Customs. We've had an open chat dialogue going back and forth because we usually wire the box mags of our machine guns directly into the Phets. Now that sounds kind of crazy for a lot of people because you're talking about immediately screwing with the circuit board, and unless you're proficient at it, yeah, unless you're proficient at it, you can cause problems or you can ultimately just destroy it. It's funny because Perrin has actually been very receptive in terms of where you solder the wires on for the box mags so that the system feeds together in synchronicity versus having a box mag that has a power flow that's separate. And fun fact, like I take gate, what model is that? I think it's the Warfet, whatever it is. It's the one that you can program basically using the stupid little switch.
The little card. Oh
yeah,
no. Yeah, I know which one.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, the green one, the
Super
green
simple.
switch thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I install those basically on machine guns that have just basic micro switches, like the old school ones that we all know on 249s.
Yep.
I'll do that, and then I'll wire it internally to the box mag, so the whole system feeds together. Everyone's seen, well, not everyone, but some people have seen the C9 video I put up of the build that I did for my buddy, and the battery's plugged into the box mag. Box mag feeds into the gun, and the whole system fires intricately, and you can also pre-wind and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of neat what you can do with Phets, especially in terms of like what it's compatible with, but you got to be careful. And then, like on that comment towards Raven stuff, I've been looking at brushless motors and things like that now because they're becoming available. And now all of a sudden it's kind of like, this is going to be pushing the envelope of like quote peak performance because you're talking about a motor that is far more efficient than the existing ones we had before. And brushless motors are common in like RC and a whole lot of other areas. But that's also like crazy stupid performance because a lot of them, they're super torquey, but they also spin ridiculously fast. And you're talking like, I think the base stock one I've seen at the lowest right now is 20,000 RPMs. And then the highest is like 46 to 50. And I'm like, that's insane. You're talking DSG
is
on
your
like
gears
SSG.
gonna even keep up with that?
100%.
Not for long.
Yeah, you just need good gears. You just need good gears.
Not for
Siege
long.
tech.
Yeah.
Another
Exactly.
$300 down the drain.
Yeah.
And then it breaks. Okay, got it.
But so pose a question to you guys. Is there a one all beats all MOSFET? Like, is there one that will fit in everything, or the one that you'll go with all the time, kind of thing? Or is it like
a
one of those?
go-to?
Yeah, or is it one of those kinds of
Can
things?
you readjust the question to more of, is there one go-to that new people should go to, as in like non-techs? And then for techs that actually do teching, is there one that they should go to? 2 avenues, you could answer it whichever way you want.
No. All new people are gonna have to pay a tech to do it anyway. Let's be real.
That's true.
It's a good point. If you're new and you don't know how to install stuff, just get a plug and play style Phet.
Yeah,
it's the easiest way to do it, and you won't really screw anything up. If you are okay at teching or you're confident with what you're doing, my go-to is now Perrin's hybrid. And formerly, it was the Perrin V2 optical Phets. I don't think they make them anymore. I think they're only really making the hybrids now.
Yeah, they're only pushing out the hybrids. The V2 opticals are done production.
Discontinued?
Yeah.
I'll say this much. They're my go-to. They're affordable, and at the same time, they're extremely good for what you get right out of the box. And they're stupid simple. It's nice.
And for you, Raven?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Dave. Perun is the best way to go. And like I've been saying, it's a bang for buck MOSFET. They have different product lines. For V2, you could get the V2 hybrid, their newest iteration of their V2 gearbox MOSFET. They're super reliable. Like they just work. They're super simple to install. Their installation videos are super simple also. Customer service is very helpful. Customer service is really good. That's for people who are somewhat familiar with Airsoft MOSFETs and all that stuff. They also do, for example, if you have a GNG, they do have a plug and play MOSFET also. I believe it's the ETU Plus or something like that. And all you have to do is replace the old ETU unit for the GNGs. Just unplug it and then plug this one in, and that's pretty much plug and play. Connect the negative and the positive wires together. Make sure red to red, black to black. Don't mix it. Don't mix it. Yeah, it's just super simple. Like they have videos showing how to do it, and honestly, like nowadays, prune is the way to go. I feel like gone are the days of gate where they used
Pay to play.
pay to play. They still are pay to play, which I don't
they
like.
haven't changed their model.
They haven't, which I don't like, because you have somebody spending X amount of $100 into, let's say, for example, a new player comes and they're like, they hear from their buddies, oh, gate is so good. They get a gate Titan, but they buy the base model because that's all they could afford. Let's say kids, obviously their parents are like, okay, what's the most cheapest, or what's the cheapest model you have that's okay? And the people at stores would recommend get the gate Titan, but usually it's the basic, because obviously they would tell them we have the advanced one, but that's going to cost X amount more. So they won't realize that there's a paywall until...
That sounds predatory to begin with.
It is.
Honestly.
Yeah, it is. It's bad. It's bad.
You're preying on the fact that you have a higher model that's expensive, but it's the same as the base model, but you have to upgrade yourself up to that. And it's kind of...
It's good if you're going to run just gate and you're going to be the sole like user of a gate kind of system, then it makes sense, right? Because like then you're just being a brandy, right? And that's what you're following and everything. But there's tons of disadvantages, right? Like you know, the other MOSFETs that have been mentioned before, right? Like the Bluetooth systems, right? They're not bulky whatsoever. Gate's Bluetooth system is literally a piece of hunk of thing you got to add in there,
and you
to add
got to
on.
plug it in to actually use it.
It's like it's great when you're trying to program or text something. It is horrible if you're trying to put it back into your gun.
Imagine you're brand new to Airsoft, and then all of a sudden your gate Titan stops working, or something goes wrong. You're like, what do I do now? I don't have.
You can't do anything unless you have it unlocked.
Unless you like now you have to buy the Bluetooth dongle or the dongle to attach to the Dean's connector, and then you have to connect that either to a phone or a laptop. And then once you do that, you have to get the software.
Or even worse, take it to a tech that can actually tech on gates, because like,
or has all the equipment to do it.
Exactly, because I ran into this when I first got into it all, right? I didn't have all the gate equipment and everything like that, and you know, now it's ended up that way. And I hate to say it, you know, it's like it's by force, you know, it's not really not really by want, right? And it comes down to where it's just like, you know, like you have to, like, if you're going to, it's a tech special. I think that's what it comes down to.
To put it nicely, back in the day when Gate was doing just their plug and plays that had like the basic version or the advanced version, if you wanted to solder the signal wires to the trigger contacts instead, those ones were nice because they gave you the tools to program it, and then
those are still affordable.
And then immediately when they went to the Titan, it's almost like they're like, oh, we can make a lot of money out of this. Let's just jack this up, you know? And that's exactly what they've done.
It's like, how do you say this? They want to keep you in their ecosystem. They want to
keep buying products.
Exactly. Keep buying products from us. Oh, we might release something new, but you have to have X item for it to work properly. They want to keep you within their ecosystem. They want to try keep like taking your money from whatever possible chance they can. And so, in my opinion, that's like kind of unfair to airsofters, because all we want to do is just play and have fun, right? That's the name of the game.
Yeah. So, dude, 100% is predatory.
Aside from that type of marketing schema, is Gate, without looking at the price, and you paid for the full thing, is it good or not?
It's good, but it's not worth the money that they're charging you.
Yeah, no.
It should be cheaper.
They have things that are good. Not everything they have is good. Because they have some affordable things, right? Like their Nano AB is great, right? The Pico that they have is great. The Phet, you know, in my opinion, is great.
I agree with you. The Phets are great. The problem I have with Gate is the Titan. It's just the Titan series alone. It's a ripoff. If the Titan basic model price is what the advanced model cost, and then the basic model was only like, I don't know, $100. Sure, I'd say maybe that's a little bit more reasonable, but it's like Raven said, it's predatory. It's a scrupulous business practice in terms of marketing, and I think it's really poopy to take advantage of people to that degree, because if you want them to continue buying your products, why not just make a really good product that people will come back and buy another one to put in another gun that buy, because no airsofter in their right mind buys one gun. They buy multiple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Let me put a gate and everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, let me put a basic gate and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I guess I'll pose another question here. I don't want to be going over too many questions here, but I'm the dumb one here. Sorry, guys. Is there an airsoft gun that is available out there that's already like have a Mosfet installed that's good? Like, are we looking at certain? Okay, all right, you got me there. But like G&G advertises, like they have a Mosfet ready to go. What is it? LVOA, Crytek has has like I'm guessing they're a standard for that, because they always
stuff has MOSFETs.
It all has MOSFETs in it. A lot of the newer airsoft guns out there are coming out with MOSFETs. Is the way going forward with MOSFETs, or is it still the old-fashioned way of gears and a wire?
I think it's I think it's going forward to MOSFETs. I think airsoft guns are going to go from dumb guns to smart guns before we know it. And I mean in the sense of like companies will basically have all the trigger features that you could probably imagine being installed into it. It is the way that it's going. I think Crytek was one of the first companies that kind of embraced that fully in all their lineup. And now it's kind of set a benchmark for a lot of other companies. And then it's too funny because people will go buy a brand new AEG, and if it's just a stock gearbox, like, and it's perfectly okay, the first thing that they do is they go, I want to put a MOSFET in this because it's not a Crytek. Because Crytek set a standard with their basic Phet system, which by the way is probably the best in terms of like stock Phets you'll get out of any gun.
They're really well built.
Yeah.
So Crytek,
they're super robust.
So I'm right. Crytek is the top brand with MOSFETs. Is there any second or
just
third at this point?
Well,
I hate saying. Oh man,
you could go ahead. You could go ahead.
I hate saying this, but Ares.
Really?
Ares. Yeah,
wow.
Ares.
They're the only other one. They're the only other one that was really like decided to do the same thing as Crytek. I remember their first. I don't know what they call it, but you had this stupid like giant brick you plugged in to program it. It had lights on both sides. I don't remember the name of it.
Oh, that was a long time ago. Dang.
Yeah, they're still using the same system. The thing is they've updated the circuit boards. They've updated how they actually build their Phets. They're learning, and to be fair, they're actually trying to build better performing built-in Phet systems. So I got to commend them on that. It just sucks that all their stuff is proprietary and super poopy on the other level.
So that's the downside. Okay.
Yeah.
I took apart Honey Badger, one of my teammates' Honey Badgers, and the
amoebas, right?
Yeah, the amoebas. Yeah, and their MOSFETs are really like, it's nice and like it's snappy. Like the stock gun is snappy, but if you want to replace it, if you want to put a new like MOSFET in, you really
have
can't.
To buy theirs.
Yeah, because the gearbox is built around the MOSFET. There's literally a square cutout to put that box MOSFET in, and it's an interesting system because the way that the timing works is with magnets. So there's a magnet, I believe, on the sector gear.
On the sector gear.
It's on the sector gear. Yep.
I think they're the first company that actually integrated that too.
Yeah, and there's this like little like bridge that connects to a small magnet, and it practically, that's how the MOSFET knows how much the timing is and how well the gun is running or something like that. But yeah, it's a pretty cool system.
I have to correct myself on that one. The first company that actually innovated magnets on the sector gear was actually Sistema PTWs, which no one uses.
Sistemas.
Yeah, they're the first ones that really did that. They had like they were the first ones to have like serious Phets actually built into their system. Mind you, you paid an arm and a leg for it, and it wasn't waterproof. And if you took it out in the rain, you had to bag your gun. I still remember guys doing that. But we won't talk about PTWs because PTWs are kind of like the way of the dodo now.
Yeah, before they used to be the thing. Like if you wanted,
they were the thing.
If you wanted a super competitive gun, if you wanted So it's practically nowadays like the HPA. If you wanted
Yeah.
something that performed top spec without, going into the deep end of teching to it, you would get a PTW, and
PTW.
then call it a day. But nowadays, you could buy a MOSFET for super cheap and throw that in, and practically you're doing the same thing
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
a PTW did
Mhm.
years
Yeah.
back.
I would definitely like back to your point there, Poi, on the question is like Crytek. It's definitely
Yeah.
out there. Mind you, right? Them being an American based company and stuff like that, like David was saying, they did set the standard, right? Like then all the other companies sort of started following suit. Like we were shitting on earlier, G&G tried their first generation MOSFET's really trash. Their ETU switch as well, in my opinion,
I, got,
Yep.
I gotta
really
ask a
prone to
question.
breaking.
Do you remember one of their first ETU guns? Because I remember it very well. It was their VSS.
I know I don't. I do not remember their first one. No.
Their VSS was one of the first AEGs that they released, like their high tier line that had their new ETU system.
Man, that one
Yeah.
is with the
Yeah.
the light on it and everything. Oh yeah.
It's,
Okay, I've
dude,
worked
that
on
thing
one
is
of those.
dead. It is
Yeah.
dead. Like,
It
those
is
don't
it's not
exist
fun.
anymore.
It's not fun to work on. I'll tell you that. To get
Mhm.
the one to work was a pain in the butt. Mind you, their third generation MOSFET is a little better.
Yeah.
I haven't had any problems with that one at all, and that's the one that usually comes in like their MP5s and whatnot. It's the little
Mhm.
yellow square one. The Gen 2 is the
Yeah.
blue square. Those actually were an improvement on the Gen 1 because the Gen 1 had no speaker. The blue one, the Gen 2, had a speaker on it, so for everyone would know when something went wrong because the thing would just go beep. So things were
Yeah.
improving and whatnot. And now in their G2 series, I've only had like one or two failures in a couple people's guns, and that had to do with I think some weird other issues. But
Yeah.
they're good. But the problem is it comes down to the same thing like I was saying
Mhm.
before, right? If they don't have good MOSFETs that are coming into the guns that you're buying today with the amount that they cost, right? Is it worth replacing, right? Because like some of
Mhm.
these new ones in the G2, right? It comes out, it's got an extended circuit board in there, so they have like that little magwell switch,
Yeah.
so that that extra safety feature. So if people are a little rough with their guns, right? You could totally snap that just by trying to do an AK style reload or something like that, right?
Yeah, and then the real question comes into play too, in terms of like companies building it into the guns. Is the question is whether you can buy replacements or whether they offer a warranty for them. I know I got to hand it to G&G on this one. I know they have a good customer service program, and if you do have an issue, you can contact them, and they will send you replacement parts. Granted, obviously you'll pay for it, but at the same time, it's not like other companies where it's like a wishbone. You kind of throw it out there in the ether, and you don't get a response.
Well, and also think about this too, right? Their G2 one, like it's got those bells and whistles and whatnot, but to buy it off the market, I think it's like $94 or $110. Now, at that price, right? Would it be better to get one of the other ones that have a lot more bells and whistles? Like you know what I mean? Like it becomes a touchy sort of like
a touchy subject.
Yeah, because
it depends on compatibility too. Because sometimes the unfortunate part with any company that wants to build its own Phet, and this is what pisses me off about them, what that they do it is they don't build anything standard. They always go, oh yeah, we'll make it our own unique thing. It's like, why can't you just do what everybody else does? Make a Phet,
it universal.
Make it universal, drop it in. That way, like if someone has a problem, they can either buy one of yours, or if they don't like it, they can buy another one. Versus going, oh well, my Crytek MOSFET is dead, so now I have to drop in a different one. You got to modify the Nautilus gearbox, which, by the way, is a huge pain in the ass.
It is.
Being motivated by money really kind of kicks us in the nuts there for fun, doesn't
pay
it?
to play, baby.
Pay to play. That's what it is.
No, go ahead, Raven.
Oh yeah, so going on those things, what everybody is saying, Crytek is number one in my opinion. Also, two contenders go up for second place. Maple Armories, they make
I have one, and and you've seen it, Tack. They're really good, and I have.
Well, they're fun. I like you.
Yeah, they're good. Like I have a teammate of mine who uses one. They're really good. Like out of the box, you just plug and play, and they work. Like
and you
don't
see
have
how
to
much
touch.
it costs, and
Yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, what?
Well,
Really?
the
Yeah,
funny thing
it's so
too with
cheap.
the funny thing
It's
too with
so
like
cheap.
Maple Armories is kind of like, I'd say, the economy line of like what would you call it, umbrella armories in Canada. They
Yeah.
build their own guns,
Yeah,
which is
100%.
great,
Yeah.
and they build their stuff for performance for you, but they don't charge you an arm and a
Arm and a
leg,
leg, exactly.
which is
Mhm.
great.
Yeah,
And,
it comes from a person who totally wants you to like get the community to play.
Mhm. What
And,
would be
like-
really neat too is if they built drop-in gearboxes for people, which would be
Yeah.
a nice suggestion as well.
That could happen, but you got to remember when you get into that level of stuff,
I know
you're getting into
compatibility
some
issues with
Compatibility
gearboxes
well,
and
well,
bodies.
And
compatibility
lowers.
as well as like you're
Yeah.
getting into the huge manufacturing process of things, right? Like
Mhm.
that right there, like I don't believe like airsoft gearboxes, everything's made in one factory. You know what I mean? Right?
No, they
So
aren't. No.
to get
That's
to
why
that
it
sort
says
of level-
99.9% compatible, because there's that
Yeah.
1%.
1%, that's
with
all.
that 1%, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
more
but
like
hey,
10, but still.
no. Yeah. So okay, guys, I would just like to start wrapping up here because I have been taking up a lot of your guys' times, and I really like to thank our viewers here for sticking out with us and listening in. I'm just gonna go through here and see if there are any more questions that our viewers have for our other two techs here, and then we'll just get on with just wrapping up here. So I'll just give a moment for our guys in the live text box there to throw out a last few minute questions. And with that, I'm going to also pose a final question here for you guys. When
Shoot.
should you get a Mosfet? Schoolboy.
Don't take my advice like word of mouth. You buy a stock gun, you have a little extra money, get a Phet. I put a Phet in everything. It's like the first thing I do, even if the gun's stock. But yeah, I mean, if you're new and you don't have money right away, save up and get a Phet. I'm still going to lean on that kind of notion. That's kind of my go-to. But obviously, like, take it with a grain of salt. You don't, or a grain of sand. You don't have to do it every single time.
Okay. All right. Raven, when should you get a Mosfet?
Well, I'm pretty much on the same page with Dave. You should get a MOSFET. When you feel like you're satisfied with playing, you had fun and everything, but then once you start noticing, like if you start getting serious into it and you want a bit more performance, then you could go into looking into getting a MOSFET and looking more into it, and or even asking a tech for recommendations, because maybe you want faster trigger response and all that. Like you see your buddies with their cool Gate Titans, and and you want
Oh, that's gonna be a thing now, isn't it? Your
Yeah.
buddies with their cool Gate
Gate
Titans.
Titans. No. Okay. But yeah, in all seriousness, if you want the time to get a MOSFET is when you already had enough fun with your stock gun and you want a bit more performance. That's when you should think into investing your lunch money and saving up for a proper MOSFET.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And for myself, upgrade when it's broken. Literally, like, don't spend money that you don't need to. It's all about having fun, playing. Especially when you talk to me, maybe I'm not the guy you want to talk to. Maybe I'm not the guy who's gonna get you to spend your money. I'm the guy who's gonna get you to get your gun working. You bring it to me. End of the day, it should be working. If not, it's because I don't have parts.
Spoken like a true tech.
Yeah.
I'm the worst guy to ask for upgrades.
Yeah. So
I just tell you to get a gas gun.
oh,
Plug
okay.
in,
Well, that
play,
is not the
go.
subject. So Poi is.
That is a different subject.
I got one last question for you
Okay.
guys.
Alright.
I don't see any questions on the. Oh, there is. a few.
I see a
Yeah,
couple
a few.
questions here. Yeah.
I guess go with them. Ask me last because mine's more relevant to the ending.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see here. Okay. So one question from our Discord user Leah here. I have been very interested in this so far. One thing I'm interested in is what is your guys' opinion on what would be a good project gun for someone who wants to learn on how to get into being a tech. Let's start off with Raven.
Project gun, honestly, if you can, get a Boneyard gun, like Boneyard's G&G CM16. Like those are one of the best things to learn on, because you could just open the gearbox, check out what part is what. And if you want to get into more the electrical side of things like MOSFETs, you can just buy the cheaper ones first. There are super cheap MOSFETs out there that you could try around that won't break the bank, and you could try from there. But yeah, I'd really recommend either a super beat up GNG or either a boneyard one to try experiment and see what fits where, how things work. And also Google is your best friend. You could if you need any more information, you could check there, or either ask a tech on the field on what part, like what certain parts do what. But yeah.
Okay, and then David, sorry, I was I got lost in the sauce here.
All good.
I got on my screen.
You,
It's like
You had a moment.
yeah, I had a moment.
I'm kind of old school, so I mean, boneyard is definitely I'd say is the way to go nowadays.
Yeah.
Mainly because you can always find something out there. But my old method was, once you get your second gun, if you want, either turn one or two of those, one out of the two of those into your sort of your tech gun. So something that you experiment with, and then you have a backup. And then the other piece of advice is, get something that is aftermarket compatible and like legitimately aftermarket compatible. G&G, great option, especially their combat machine stuff. It's bone stupid to work on in so many different ways. Same thing with some of the older GMPs, and I got to think about it like VFCs as well too, but that's obviously like pretty pricey. But if you have a spare gun, that's the only time I would start really teching. You need something to work with and something to basically play with. The worst thing is to have your playing gun, your teching gun. And I've made that mistake before, and there's nothing worse than going to the field and you're like, oh, well, shit, like all the upgrades I did last night don't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It's like I plugged the battery in and like, why is it hopping down? Why is it
doesn't
not
feed?
working?
Oh,
Yeah, it doesn't feed.
There goes the piston.
What's that whirring sound?
Yeah. Okay, well, for myself, it's an M4 platform. Obviously, G&G Combat Machine's the most recognized one. You want to start off with something super basic, nothing complicated on the inside, because you want to gain an understanding of the basics of how a gearbox works. Because once you understand how the gear's moving, the piston working, the timing of everything and all that, after that, it's just expanding and changing the position on where they all are. In the end, it's still driving a piston system. So once you understand the basics of that, now you can start changing that V2 into something like this, which is like P90, V6 or V7, whatever it is, right? And then, going from there. So any kind of basic M4, because every piece of it is customizable. So it lets you easily learn. Next question is from Armstead. Feelings on the Murph 3.2 inline plug and play, and any kind of recommendations on battery voltages. I'm going to shoot this one to you, David.
I use Murphs 3.2s quite frequently. I actually like them. They're a good Phet. I know you have the simple plug and play mode, and then you have the advanced, which is like soldering the signal connectors basically to the wires, if I remember correctly. They're fantastic MOSFETs, and honestly, like regardless of what you run them off of, 11.1 or 7.4, they work great. Just don't go car battery. You can go RC battery with them, but they're like hit or miss with RC batteries. If you're what do you call it? Like your cell discharge basically is way too high. I've made that mistake of trying to see the limits of it, and I decided, okay, I'm going to see what a 50C battery does. Yeah, it's not a good time.
No.
And here I am rocking my gun, no MOSFET with a car battery.
Yeah, you can do it. That's a lot of go-go juice.
I'm gonna look up YouTube of car battery hooked up to airsoft gun. Let's go.
It's called a backpack.
Y'all heard me on the field. 32 RPS of pure.
Sorry, sir. What's the field RPS limit?
35 for AGs.
That's still high. I mean,
it is for AGs. Let's see your gun last that long.
I'm not gonna lie. I got inspired by a guy's Instagram post who actually managed to build one of those machine gun like Terminator packs, that feeds from the back with a BB hose. He built all the links, and then his batteries in his backpack too. And I'm like, hey, dude, what kind of battery you running there? And he like sent a picture of this giant RC battery. I'm like, holy moly. Okay, I'm going to try this out. We'll see if I can get that going.
18-volt battery. I don't know. All I know is that I got one of those brick batteries with a giant Dean's connector that I attaches to. You'll see me out on the field sometimes. I run it when I want to go real pew on city. Yeah. Let's see here. Last question here by Tony. APs. Okay, actually, that's an interesting question that you bring up. Can you put a MOSFET inside a TMAP? I'm going to throw this to you again, David, just because I know you've been around for quite a long time and you've actually seen them pass through in and out. What's your opinion on that? Is it possible? Is it even worth it?
You can do external MOSFETs on AEPs. The question is whether you have room inside of it with the battery space. And the other question that I have is, why on earth are you buying AEPs?
Yeah. That was my question. Like, why?
I'm going to say this. Yeah, I'm going to say this bluntly. They are the worst AEG system that you could arguably buy next to Star's plastic gearboxes. Yep. I don't know why you would purchase them. They're really poopy.
You know what? It's the novelty, David. It's the novelty.
They're memes now, man. They are honestly memes.
It's a flex factor. Okay, well, guys, that's all the questions that we're going to be answering today, other than the last one that Poi has. So I'm going right back.
My last question before we close this off is resources. What do you guys use resources to research all of these things? Because as someone who doesn't know anything or doesn't have like any like equipment that you guys have, do you just go to text, or do you just go to internet, or do you go to forums, or what is your main resource for researching, and as well as, you know, installing and all of this fun jazz that you do with MOSFET installations?
Here, Poi, I'm gonna post this in live text box. This is my favorite one.
So
let me Google that for you. Okay.
I guess for me, just to put it simply, it's kind of it's a mix of both now. Mm-hmm. I still reference forums. I do Google things, but I'll be perfectly honest. I've built up kind of a network now with enough people that I know who are more technical, whether it be across the country or down in the States as well. And we share a lot of information with each other, or I'll always ask questions directly to them and people who basically screw around with the stuff either a little bit more than I do, or have an electrical engineering background or an engineering background in general. Mm-hmm. And then I'll reference forums for stuff. I take everything with a grain of salt, though, when someone tells me something, because you'll always have two opinions, and you'll have one person go, oh, it's great, and you'll have someone else go, oh, it's shit. And then the real problem is you know, whether you spend the money on it or not. So take it for what it is, right? And kind of try and find your information from people who know what they're talking about versus just buddy who just dropped it in his gun and goes, oh, it's poopy, and read it on like a random forum. Because some of the Facebook groups out there, like for teching, are just, oh my God, they're hogwash.
What's that saying? It's like believe believe nothing of what you hear and half of what you say, or what you see, or something like that. Yeah,
something along those lines.
Yeah, I know my dad would know. He's always full of those kinds of things. Jesus. But
Raven, what about you?
Yeah, honestly, you can go on the internet, YouTube, for your information to look up stuff, but like what Dave said, take it with a grain of salt or sand. Don't trust everything, because a lot of stuff that you might find on the internet could be outdated, like years back. Like it could be really outdated stuff. It might still work, it might not, who knows? That's why take it up with a tech that you might know, ask around. The community is really big, so there are techs out there, but like I said, what Dave said, there is always conflicting ideas with everybody, because everybody has their own way of dealing with certain problems, and they have different ways of dealing with it and finding the answers, but in the end it might lead to the same answer or to a different one. So yeah, do your research, ask around, then you could somewhat conclude what your answer might be in the end. because yeah, there's no specific course that teaches teching. Like there's nothing.
There's no university for this.
Yeah, unless you go to e-bike or they have. I remember reading this somewhere. Umbrella Armory had like this
Yeah.
course
Yeah.
where they would certify you as a tech or something like that. So
GNG had the
Money
same
grab.
one too.
yeah,
Cash grab.
Yeah, what you had to do is you had to be able to take apart a fully working gun in a certain time frame, all the way
Yeah.
to its every single screw, all the way taken apart, and then
Yeah.
put all the way back together, and it had to feed 8 or 5 full magazines.
yeah,
Kind of it's still kind of a cash grab when you're talking about that kind of stuff because there's no hallmark or standard. And because there
Exactly.
is no standard, it's really hard to kind of go off of that and in that sense too. And like
Changing landscape.
yeah.
I mean, it's not gonna stay.
It's always
static.
shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always
What-
evolving.
Exactly, and that's probably the biggest factor, right?
Mhm.
I only know earlier we talked about the brushless motors and stuff like that. Because of that factor, that now throws a whole new wrench
Yeah.
in there, right? Because now you're running into the whole thing where you don't even need all those other MOSFETs. You just need to change your motor, and then Bob's your uncle.
Yeah,
Right?
to be fair too, to kind of like sum this up in a very crude term, but airsofters are like probably the worst customers for the companies because we will buy something that is built really nice and everything, and we will ruin it in a day, and then we will go online and lambast it and call it a piece of poo.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what we do all the time, and then we'll talk about things we think we like and things we don't actually understand. That happens a lot.
But yeah.
Alrighty.
I learned a lot of things today, so thank you
Yeah.
guys for being out here.
It's a
Tack,
pleasure.
you could close it off because yeah, it's getting late here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for everyone. I just wanted to say my last thing is don't be afraid to do something. Don't always take someone else's word for it. Sometimes you need to do it yourself just so that you can prove someone else wrong, because maybe they didn't thoroughly go through something, or they just overlooked something else. I've had this kind of problem before. If you have your stuff to back up what you have to say and stuff like that, then you have a debate that you guys can go over and come to a healthy resolution. The whole point is just to better each other, right? So if someone finds a better answer, you shouldn't just be like, oh, I didn't come up with it, it's not a good answer, right? Always be willing to learn, always be willing to better yourself. With that said, guys, really like everyone here sticking around to the very end. Really love you guys and appreciate you guys. It's getting late, so y'all should get to sleep. This has been episode 72.
Yeah.
Should you get a MOSFET? I think we've
answer
summed
is
it all
yes.
up, guys.
The answer is
yeah,
yes.
The answer is yes. The clickbait answer is yes. We're gonna put in the thumbnail.
Took
no.
us
It
2
took us
hours.
2 hours.
2 hours to get to this portion.
It's clickbait.
Yeah,
all
but
clickbait.
yeah, appreciate you guys. Love you guys. I'd like to thank Raven for coming out, spending time with us. I would like to thank David for coming out, spending time with us. If you guys have any last words for our viewers here before we close off.
Airsoft is cool.
Alrighty. All right, Raven.
Save your lunch money that you get from your parents and spend it wisely.
All right, guys, those are some wise final words from our guests here. It has been your boy Tack and your boy Poi here at the podcast with Panther Airsoft Folding Table Talk, episode 72. Catch you guys on the next one.
See ya.